The score sheet program is really just a tool to facilitate efficient and easy ways to track students and to use a valid assessment program for music performance. I thought about this for a very long time, going back, I think, to my first job in 1972, where I walked in and thought to myself, I need to know how these kids play. I knew nothing about them. What literature could I pick, right? What curriculum do I need to design? What training do the kids need? And so, like many of us, I was assessing from day one, and I always did it one at a time. Starting in a smaller situation in the early days, it was easier to do that. And of course, that system evolved a little bit for me as I entered judges training in 1977 to learn to be, at the time, a drum and bugle corps judge. And I took a strategic approach. I figured I had a music degree. I didn't understand much about the marching side of things. And so I went into the marching caption. And there I was introduced to and met some of them, my still lifelong friends, the practitioners of what was then called the M&M caption, the visual caption today. These folks were engineers. They were financial advisors. They were not musicians at all. It really gave me a clear look into how they approached this thing. And it was a melting of both the kind of the scientific side of how this was done, which at the time, marching could be done a little bit that way. There was this thing called the tick system that you may have heard about, where essentially a judge would see an error and he would mark a sheet as an error. And of course, over time that evolved. We knew that you couldn't possibly mark down all the mistakes, number one. If you did on some of the developmental groups, you could do what they called zero them out, and they ended up with zero score. So the concept of setting a standard, a point where an error is determined, was talked about. And then, of course, everything changed when we started thinking about non-tick systems or giving people credit. And so that long period of time of training and then my involvement in drum corps in the early days, alongside with my music education teaching in high schools, really over time they kind of came together for me. And when the requirement to assess seriously came into play, I happened to be back in the classroom. Assessment was a major topic, and the school was going through a major revision of how they assessed kids. And these concepts, I found, made a lot of sense, particularly on the non-performance side. The challenge for me was always to connect that to what we did and what we assessed, because like many of you, if you've had this experience, the non-performance-based classes, including music appreciation or general music, where there's not a performance standard that's in play, that works pretty well for them, I guess. It certainly didn't work well for the orchestra and the band I was teaching at the time, and our department felt the same way. And so we struggled with it, but we borrowed some of those concepts. I had a period of time at the end of 2016 and 2017 to think about this, and took some time to write down how it could be done and what the principles were. And it really was very clear to me by that point. It's just that we had to figure out a better way to explain to administrators, to parents and teachers and students how we graded. We did it all the time. For a long time, A, B, and C on the outside were the three letter grades that were used in band, orchestra, and choir. Kid usually didn't stay in if they were getting a C or a D, right? If they even got that. And of course, we being the industry, deployed a lot of different, what I call kind of fake assessment tools, showing up at events, that kind of thing, making sure that your equipment is tidy, cooperation, leadership, all those kind of generic things that really have very little to do with how well a kid plays. And over the years, you'd have a kid that would play tremendously, but didn't do well on the grading side because we were grading them on the wrong criteria. So anyway, long story short, I spent the time to put it down and as a result created this book, Assessing Music Performance, a Valid System for Measuring Student Performance and Growth. It's a solid piece of work from a philosophical point of view, I believe. it also works. And it also speaks to the practitioners in the field today. That what it says here is that we can't assess the same way that non-performance groups do. And so that's where our discussion of standards comes in, and the discussion of an extensive point system that can differentiate and separate students. And thirdly, the importance of ranking people within sections, within ensembles, right? Because if you don't rank, you don't get a distinction. You basically have two breakpoints, A's, B's, and C's. It doesn't provide a whole lot of information to a kid, even to you. You can do it in your head a little bit. Well, I know where Bob goes and Mary goes and, that kind of thing. Randall goes. But that's kind of a secret inside of our head, and this is trying to bring a system into play that we can actually deploy it. And we become better assessors by doing it, because I believe that you can write all rubrics all day long, and that if you evaluate kids, there are so many things that happen instantaneously that tell you what the skill set of this kid is. And you can't do a checkbox on that, right? And they are interrelated to each other. It isn't like you get part A correct and part B wrong. You have things that happen instantaneously because the test is the performance right there. What caused the intonation in the upper register? Was it breath support? Why did the breath support go bad? Because of a previous phrase where they ran out of gas? Is fatigue a factor? Are they now in a range where that challenges them? So all these things go on in our mind quickly as musicians. How do we get that down? So that's what the book's about. And this section is designed to guide you through some of the concepts in small chunks. And I've borrowed from a number of the workshops and seminars that I've done over the last 3-4 years on it. It is not being talked about much in the country, including within associations, across the country. The workshops, seminars, books, symposia that I see are really reporting on the status quo, putting out tips and how-tos. The issue of assessment has not been unveiled yet for performance in music. And that's the lifetime goal of mine, actually, some 40 years of thinking about this to explain it. So I welcome you to this classroom session. There's a lot of short things that are titled. Feel free to move around within them and to gain a further understanding.